My name is Brooke Griffin. I'm 30 years old and I live in New York City. From the outside, my life looks calm, stable, almost enviable. I run a small but growing pet care service chain, have my own apartment, a car, and a sunlit office where I often work late into the evening. People assume I must come from a proud, supportive family. They're wrong. Or maybe I should say, I used to have one. The moment everything truly ended happened last Easter, in a crowded dining room filled with relatives who smiled too easily and listened too little. That Sunday afternoon, I left Manhattan earlier than usual. I've always been the type to arrive early, 15 minutes ahead, minimum. Showing up on time felt like proof that I still cared, even when no one seemed to notice. The house was already buzzing when I arrived. Laughter, overlapping conversations, the familiar smell of roasted meat and wine. It felt warmer than past holidays. Too warm, like a performance. My mother had told me over the phone, "Your father has something important to announce." I didn't ask what it was. I placed the chocolate mousse cake on the kitchen counter, the one she used to love, from a tiny bakery tucked into a Brooklyn alley. I'd brought it out of habit, out of hope maybe, as if small gestures could preserve what was already slipping away. 20 minutes later, everyone had settled in. Glasses clinked. Conversations drifted from real estate to stock markets, to which private school the kids would attend. I sat at the corner of the table, quiet, observant, invisible. Then my father stood. He raised his glass, his posture straight, his voice booming in that unmistakable tone, the one reserved for announcements that were never open for discussion. "Everyone, please quiet down." The room fell silent instantly. "Our family has made a decision," he said. "Starting today, all assets, including the company, the shares, and the real estate, will be handed over to Matteo." For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him. Then the applause erupted. Loud, immediate, enthusiastic, as if everyone had already known. My mother smiled, eyes shining. "Matteo has been working at the company for 5 years," she added proudly. "He'll carry on the legacy." I stared down at the glass of water in front of me. The cold seeped into my fingertips, but it couldn't numb the ache spreading through my chest. No one looked at me. No one asked what I thought. I was there, but I didn't exist. Matteo is my younger brother, 2 years younger. Growing up, I believed we were treated equally. 2 birthday cakes, 2 bikes, same punishments, same rules. I believed in fairness. That belief died quietly the day I turned 18. But sitting there, listening to applause meant for someone else, I finally understood something painful and irreversible. I hadn't just been overlooked. I'd been written out. And for the first time in my life, I broke my silence. I lifted my head and asked clearly, "What about me?" The room froze. The question hung in the air like smoke. What about me? For a second, nobody moved. Even the forks paused halfway to mouths. It was as if the entire room had forgotten I was capable of speaking at all. Then the whispers started. Soft, quick, sliding from one relative to the next. "That's right. Brooke is the older sister. She's here too. Does she even work for the company?" My mother reacted first. She always did, because she was the family's favorite translator, turning cruelty into something that sounded reasonable. "Brooke," she said gently, like she was soothing a child who didn't understand the rules. "You already have a career. You have your own place, your own life. But Matteo, he has nothing." Nothing. The word hit me harder than my father's announcement, because I suddenly saw the entire script they'd been following for years, how they framed my independence as proof I didn't need them, while Matteo's dependence became proof he deserved more. I set my glass down carefully. My voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. "That career," I said, looking directly at my mother, "I built it with my own hands. I left home at 18 and figured everything out on my own. I didn't take a single cent from you or Dad." My father's jaw tightened, but I kept going. "I got a scholarship, I worked through school, I paid my loans. Meanwhile, you paid for all of Matteo's tuition and covered all his expenses. And now you hand everything over to him like I never existed." My voice shook on the last word. Existed. And I hated myself for letting it show. I hated them even more for putting it there. Matteo leaned forward, smiling like someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Mom's right," he said, loud enough for the whole table. "You shouldn't be competing with me." I snapped my head toward him. "Shut your mouth," I said, pointing straight at him before I could stop myself. "You don't even have the right to speak." A collective gasp went through the room. And then my father slammed his hand on the table so hard the plates rattled. "That's enough, Brooke." His voice wasn't just angry, it was offended, like my pain was an inconvenience. "Matteo followed the path we laid out," he said. You didn't. If you hadn't chosen those filthy animals, this company would have been yours. Filthy animals. There it was. The same insult he'd used for years, dressed up like truth. My body went cold, and for a moment I was no longer 30. I was 18 again, standing in the living room of my childhood home, holding a folder of brochures, trembling with hope. That night had been early fall, the kind of evening where the light turns gold and you think maybe life is about to change for the better. I'd done everything right. Research, applications, a partial scholarship I'd fought for like oxygen. All I needed was help with the rest. I remember sitting across from my father on the couch, my heart pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. I want to study veterinary medicine, I said. I got into a program. I need a little help to get started. I expected questions. I expected advice. I expected, at the very least, a nod. Instead, he crossed his arms and stared at me like I'd confessed to a crime. I'm not putting a single dime into that, he said. If that's what you want, you're on your own. Just like that. One sentence. So simple, so final. It didn't just deny money. It denied belief. It denied love. That was the first time I understood something I couldn't name back then. In my father's eyes, I didn't matter unless I belonged to his plan. And once I didn't, the pride he'd once had in me drained away, and quietly, steadily, it filled Matteo instead. Back at the Easter table, I stared at my father. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice low but shaking. "That's an insult. Do you even realize it was because of those filthy animals that I made the money that saved your company?" His eyes narrowed. "You're exaggerating." I laughed, one sharp, bitter sound. "No," I said, "I'm not." Because I could still remember the night he called me. It had been late. So late the city outside my window was quieter than usual. My phone rang, and seeing his name made my stomach twist, because he didn't call unless he wanted something. His voice had been low, unsteady, like he'd argued with himself before dialing. "The company's in trouble," he admitted. "A major contract fell through. We need 80,000 to keep it from collapsing." 80,000. I'd stared at the number in my mind, feeling my throat tighten. "That's a lot," I said carefully. "We'll pay you back," he promised quickly. "And when your mother and I are gone, you'll still have a share. This is family business after all." I remember pausing. I remember wanting, desperately, to ask for something written, a document, a guarantee. But there was something in his voice that night, something that sounded like vulnerability, like sincerity, like a father admitting he needed his daughter. And I believed it. The next morning, I wired the money. No contract, no signature, just his words. Family. That word had been my weakness. Now at Easter, my father's face was red, his eyes blazing. "I'm not giving you a damn cent," he shouted. "I brought you into this world. I raised you, fed you, educated you. Do you know how much I spent on you? And now you're out there cleaning up after dogs and cats like it's something to be proud of." The room went silent again, but this time it wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of silence you feel after something breaks. The kind that tells you everyone heard it, and no one will unhear it. My hands curled into fists under the table. My chest burned. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. And in that moment, I realized something terrifyingly clear. My father didn't just disapprove of my life. He was ashamed of it, of me. I stood up slowly. My voice didn't shake when I spoke, but every word felt like it was tearing something out of my ribs. "If that's how you feel," I said, "then we have nothing to do with each other from now on." My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Matteo's smug expression faltered. My father's eyes widened, like he hadn't expected me to actually leave. But I was already past the point of negotiation. I grabbed my coat and turned toward the door. Then I stopped. Not to apologize, not to beg, not to soften anything. Just to say the one thing I'd held in for years. "Dad," I said without turning back, "I never asked to be born. So don't throw your sacrifices in my face like chains. Don't use them as leverage to control my life." The words landed like a slap, and I walked out, head high, hands shaking, heartbreaking in a way that felt clean, like finally cutting off something infected. When I got home that night, the first thing I did was go straight to the bathroom and turn the shower on full blast. I stood under the water until my skin turned red, like I could rinse off the humiliation, the betrayal, the sound of my father's voice calling my life disgusting. But even after I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, staring at my reflection, my face pale, my eyes hollow, I knew. This wasn't just a fight. It was a funeral. And the person I was burying was the version of me that still believed they might one day choose me. That night, after the shower fogged up the bathroom mirror and the echoes of my father's voice finally faded, I sat alone in my kitchen with a mug of black coffee growing cold between my hands. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. And yet, for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel accusing. It felt honest. I kept thinking about the day I left home at 18, how I'd packed an old suitcase, folded my clothes with care, and walked out without anyone asking if I was scared. Back then, I was, terrified. But fear has a strange way of hardening into determination when there's no one left to lean on. The first 2 years were brutal. A tiny studio apartment with barely enough space to stretch out my arms. Student loans looming over me like a countdown clock. I worked part-time jobs between classes, ate the cheapest meals I could find, and learned how to survive on very little. My parents never asked if I was okay. Not once. By my 3rd year, something unexpected happened. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. No shifts, no plans. I was sitting on the floor with my laptop when a random thought crossed my mind, almost like a joke. Why not film a short video about pet care? I stacked old textbooks and shoeboxes into a makeshift tripod, balanced my phone, and talked like I was chatting with a friend. Nothing fancy. Just honest advice about caring for animals, the same ones my father called filthy. I uploaded the video and forgot about it. 2 days later, it went viral. 3 million views in under 48 hours. I kept refreshing the page, convinced it was a glitch. Then the comments flooded in. Messages, questions, gratitude. People needed what I had to share. So I made another video, then another. A month later, I received my first payout, $2,000. I stared at the number, heart racing, unsure if it was real. 9 months later, the channel hit 1 million subscribers. By the end of the year, over 2 million across platforms. That's when brands started reaching out. Sponsorships, collaborations, product reviews, and suddenly, this thing that had started as a quiet distraction became something solid, real. I opened my first store and named it Whisker and Paw. Not just a place for cats and dogs, but a space built on patience, care, and kindness. Everything I'd once wanted from home. The store thrived. We hired staff, expanded hours, opened a second location, then a third. 4 years later, Whisker and Paw had grown into 7 locations across the city with over 30 employees, some with me from day one. They weren't just workers. They were my family, and I protected that family fiercely. I never told my parents how successful the business became, never mentioned revenue or expansion. I'd learned early that success, when shown to the wrong people, turns into expectation, and expectation turns into entitlement. 6 months after that Easter dinner, I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't go home. Neither did they. The silence felt mutual, comfortable. Freedom. Then one morning, about 6 months ago, my phone rang. Dad. My hand froze mid-pour as coffee spilled over the rim. For a split second, hope crept in, uninvited and unwelcome. What if they changed? I answered. No greeting, no apology. The company's in serious trouble, he said. Matteo signed the wrong contract. We're facing $120,000 in damages. Can you help us for the family name? I didn't hesitate. $80,000 was more than enough, I replied. If you want my help, start by paying that back. Silence. And if the only thing you're trying to save is the family name, I added calmly, remember that name never once stood up for me. I hung up. The next morning at 7 a.m., my doorbell rang. Fast, insistent. When I opened the door, there they were, my parents and Matteo. I didn't invite them in. If you're here about the money, I said evenly, turn around. My mother's eyes were red, strained. Brooke, please, you have multiple stores. $120,000 isn't much to you. Matteo stepped forward, voice suddenly small. I messed up, I know I did, just this once. I stared at them, 3 people who had never once chosen me unless they needed something. Leave, I said, before I call the police. My father's face hardened. I have nothing to do with any of you anymore, I continued. If the company collapses, that's not a tragedy. It's a consequence. I closed the door. And that should have been the end. But later, as I stood alone in my kitchen, a thought crept in, cold and unsettling. How did they know about the stores? I never told them. And that's when I understood. They had been watching, waiting. And the moment they saw something they could use, they came knocking. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid of them coming back, but because a familiar instinct had started screaming in my chest. The same one that had warned me, years ago, not to trust promises without proof. I checked my phone before bed. No messages. No missed calls. I told myself that was good. I was wrong. The next morning, my screen exploded. Messages from employees, from clients, from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Brooke, what's going on? Is this true? I saw a post about you. Please tell me it's fake. My stomach dropped. I opened the first link someone sent me. Mateo had posted everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, long paragraphs wrapped in fake humility, drenched in selective truth and outright lies. He wrote that I had abandoned my family when they were on the verge of bankruptcy, that I'd turned my parents away like strangers when they came to me begging for help. He framed himself as the dutiful son drowning under responsibility, and me as the cold, wealthy sister who valued money over blood. Thousands of shares, teens of thousands of comments. People didn't ask questions. They never do. They chose a story. And in that story, I was the villain. By noon, cancellations started rolling in. Grooming appointments wiped off the calendar. Longtime clients hesitating. Some stores saw walk-ins leave after recognizing my name. I sat in my office, staring at the numbers dropping in real time, feeling something unfamiliar settle over me. Not panic. Focus. I called Brian. I need to see you, urgently. Brian had been there from the beginning. Helped me with the lease for my first Whisker and Paw location when I was still terrified of failing. He didn't ask questions. He just told me to come in. His office hadn't changed. Clean. Quiet. Sunlight cutting across polished wood. I laid everything out. Screenshots. Revenue reports, appointment cancellations, employee messages, Mateo's post, saved before he could delete or edit it. Brian listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his arms. "You just hit the jackpot," he said calmly. I frowned. "What?" He smiled, not kindly, but confidently. "This is defamation. Clear, documented, measurable damage. He didn't just hurt your feelings, he hurt your business, and you have proof." Something loosened in my chest. For the first time since Easter, I felt grounded. "Draft the case," I said. "You have full authority." Brian nodded. No hesitation. No lecture about family. Just action. The lawsuit moved fast. A few weeks later, Mateo's lawyer reached out asking about settlement. They wanted to sell the company and stay on as internal advisors. I didn't even finish reading the proposal. "Tell them no," I said flatly. Brian looked at me, searching for doubt. There was none. "I'm not buying a company that erased me," I added. "And I'm not hiring relatives who tried to destroy me." 3 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was quiet. Too quiet. Mateo sat across from me, shoulders stiff, eyes darting. The arrogance was gone. So was the confidence. I didn't look at him. Brian presented everything. Methodically, calmly, receipts, documents, numbers that told the truth better than emotion ever could. The judge didn't hesitate. Mateo was found liable. $248,000 in damages. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood up and walked out, feeling something settle into place. Not revenge. Justice. But peace wasn't done with me yet. Peace lasted longer than I expected. 6 months passed without noise, without tension, without my phone lighting up with names that once carried authority over my life. Work stabilized. Clients returned. Employees felt safe again. Whisker and Paw healed, slowly, steadily, like any living thing does when the bleeding finally stops. Then, 3 days ago, it came back. It was a Saturday morning, gray sky, the kind that presses low against the city and makes everything feel smaller. At exactly 7 a.m., my doorbell rang. The same time, the same sound, the same insistence. When I opened the door, my mother stood there alone. She looked older, smaller. Her eyes were red, her face drawn tight, fingers clutching the strap of her bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, she said, "Your father. He's in the hospital. It's serious this time. The treatment will cost close to $20,000. She swallowed. "I know I was wrong," she whispered, "but please, just this once, help me." I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no triumph. Just a hollow stillness where hope used to live. "To me," I said calmly, "my parents died the day you both let Mateo destroy my career and said nothing." Her lips trembled. "I don't give money to the dead," I added softly. She didn't beg again. She didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen between disbelief and understanding. I closed the door gently. That afternoon, I went to the hospital, not to see my father, but to verify the truth. The treatment cost was real. The diagnosis was real. For a brief moment, my hand hovered over my wallet. Then I remembered Easter, the applause, the glasses raised, the word nothing. I made a few calls and confirmed what I suspected. My parents still owned their house. No mortgage, worth nearly $400,000. Enough to cover everything. So I sent my mother one final message. "You still have the house. Sell it to pay for Dad's treatment. She never replied. And that was my answer. I don't expect anything from them anymore, but I haven't lost faith in family. Because family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's where you choose to belong. If you've ever been expected to give endlessly just because you were the strong one, if you've ever been punished for choosing your own path, if you've ever been told to understand while no one understood you, I want you to hear this. You are not cruel for saying no. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. And sometimes love only survives when it's paired with boundaries. So tell me, was I wrong?